Okay, so here we are in Europa Universalis, start of the second round, second period. This is not the very start of the turn. I did an earlier video, obviously, but I just did the diplomacy phase. No major reshifts in diplomacy. Nobody else has declared war. Turkey had a casus belli based on the Persian Gulf War. They're not taking advantage of that. But some of the players got themselves involved in some minor diplomacy. English with Scotland, which failed. Surprisingly, Portugal got Morocco up to entry in war. And Venice was able to steal Savoy from France while France had no money to protect it. So that, remember, they have to match the investment that the opponent put. And France is kind of poor during this war. Venice snuck through. Now, Venice itself had to kind of question whether they wanted to take these kind of risks because they're not involved in a war, but they're just recovering from one. Anyway, though, they figured they have the money, and France was probably kind of hurting. They were debating taking a shot at the papacy. That wouldn't have worked. They don't know this, but the Spanish had a little bit more money, and that was kind of the thing. Which one do you want to go for? Well, the Spanish would have been able to protect the papacy. So our countries are really kind of being stretched to the maximum here. Spain having to build a lot of forces to conduct its war against the Aztecs as well as against the French. We knew that was going to happen, and France is going to have a lot to spend on their turn. But Portugal, with their having to deal with the Oman and Aden crisis, found themselves really strapped for cash. So they took out a loan. They've taken out another one already. You see, they managed to get a $60 loan. This is a foreign loan, which is more of a penalty if they don't pay it back. It's more painful. But then they went to another expediency, which is dropping a stability. You can only do this if you're at war, and declare an exceptional tax. They rolled very well and got 230 ducats. Just added to their treasury. The cost for this is a point of stability. Obviously, probably you can get 1 point of stability back for about 100 ducats with a decent ruler, and they have a very decent ruler. They were able to get some advantages, picked up Elmina again, built up Rio, as well as building a larger, for them, army and navy, which Albuquerque and Almeida are going to drag over and see if they can beat these guys. If they can knock at least one of them out of the war, that'll help them significantly. They also upped their land technology, and their naval technology went up due to the event. So they're feeling like they have a shot at this now. So Spain opens up the first round, clearing the natives out of the Aztec area again they were in. They've still got to clear it out of the capital and lay siege to that, but they've protected their colony. Sending Magellan out on that route again, exploration of Patagonia. He's going to try to make his circumnavigation. He's got quite a large fleet built up from transporting Cortez. Might as well use it for this. Spaniards back in Sierra Nevada. Up here they had to gather their armies because the revolts are getting too strong. They also slammed down into Naples and were defeated there. I'm going to hand some victory points out and some negative victory points for that sucker. Habsburg sliding up to challenge the French army up here. The Turks have repositioned their own troops to face their two major enemies, well, two only enemies, Poland and Persia. Over here, kind of forgot to mention, I brought Albuquerque and the fleet into play. Long trip into play. There was an intercept, but there was no interception there. The Turks, though, tried to combine the Oman and Aden fleets, and Albuquerque was able to intercept them, and, well, one of them, the Oman fleet, I believe, and completely disintegrate it, getting a victory there. I'm going to remember to put mods for that down, just for the peace mod. Anyway, we're working through the beginning stages here. Something I forgot to mention. So, naval combat works almost exactly the same as land combat. There's differences in the charts as to what tables you're facing, but there's one big difference here, which is the wind gauge chart. So the wind gauge uses its own technological differences, and in addition, of course, the movement factor of the admiral. Whoever wins the wind gauge, unlike some games, doesn't get an automatic first fire or something like that. He just gets a +1 on all the tables. And the ability to withdraw after the fire phase, which is kind of an interesting choice. You can engage in fire combat and then leave the battle, not taking a boarding combat. Anyway, the Portuguese got it. They chose to stick around and finish off the fleet. They broke it on the first round. You'll notice the morale values for armies are pretty good once you get past the first medieval level. You have a 2 morale +1 for veteran gives you 3. Unfortunately for fleets, Carracks only have a 1 morale. The galleons only have 2. So it's very easy to break a fleet in combat. And that's what happened on the first round. The Portuguese got a couple of stars. Later on, you'll start to see fleets being able to stick around and armies being almost unable to ever be defeated directly, which makes sieges very, very difficult. At least under the rules that I play, where the siege is broken, it's not absolutely clear which way it's supposed to fall in the game. I honestly think that the siege probably should stay unless you're actually defeated, but it makes for a more static game. And we finish up the first round with the French making some siege rolls. Themselves in for Poland. They got a breach in Naples, but they just don't have the troops to take advantage of it. They would have been storming with, I don't know, 4 artillery, which is an 8-point artillery, but very little in terms of infantry. I think they have 6 infantry left there. And they're really hoping to get enough of a bonus there that it'll just surrender or honors of war. They don't have much chance of actually taking it. Here they actually do have a large enough army, as they do up here, but over in Italy they really do not. They could shift some of their infantry down now that the Spaniards are not really commanded. That might not be such a bad idea. They didn't think of it at the time, so it didn't happen. Alright, well, we move this forward, and we get a new Spanish leader that I gotta place somewhere. He's gotta follow the placement rules, which means I've got to figure out which army he has to be in command of, basically. I think it's going to be that one down there, but it may shift other people around during their movement. So we slide into the third round, and yes, we're seeing the cost of playing a big game like this. To me, I don't know, I'm having a really hard time. You know, I've played a couple of rounds this day, and it's about the end of the day for me. Anyway, see, as Magellan made it to about here, but he died en route, and he doesn't have a replacement on board, so he's going to have to turn around with Cordoba. Well, his fleet's going to have to turn around. Spaniards making some ground, not a lot. They cleared up some of the revolts here, but the French captured 2 of the cities they're besieging. Habsburgs came and cleared the French out of Artois, and well, now the way is open for them up there, so the French are going to have to kind of react there. Turks defeated the Persians rather heavily here in the plains. Poles still holding off here. That's about it. The Spanish fleet ousted from Naples. Alright, at the end of 3 rounds, and there's no end to the turn there. What happened? Well, the Spaniards continued on their merry way. Siege there. Working down here, and actually, you know, getting some definite movement against these revolts and the Aztecs. They also pushed into Paris itself with the Habsburgs. The French responded, though. They wiped out the Spanish army here. And here's something that you can see with wars occasionally. -10. That's to the victory point not the victory point, but the war modifier. That's assuming an equal and that's unlikely. France has the advantage there. Assuming an equal stability, that's a victory point level 5, or a victory level 5 war. Spain can't afford to surrender here. They really can't. So they're going to have to drag the war out further because they're doing so poorly, which is kind of a weird situation that occurs in this game that you don't see in many games. For example, in Empires and Arms, there's sort of a worst you can do and you want to cut your losses because you don't want to keep fighting this losing war. It's losing you victory points. It's hurting your, in this case, it's hurting your economy really badly. But you really can't afford a piece of level 5. First of all, they'll be losing their 2 provinces, no question, and then have to pay a large indemnity. On the other hand, continuing the war is an expense that maybe they're unwilling to do as well. I forgot to roll these guys. Got to take care of them. The Turks actually did astoundingly well, largely almost destroying the Persian army and giving the Poles a heavy setback. Some lucky die rolls in the dip phase, and they may be able to get out of this relatively unscathed. They're not going to gain territory, although actually they could turn the tide on the Poles. They just don't have the troops here to take Mosul. So nothing's going to change on that end. Portuguese, they failed in their next attack on Aden. And at this point, they're going to kind of turn tail and head down, take out Zanzibar. They can just burn that to the ground. Maybe build a fort or something there. But they got to kind of worry because they've got this colony here. Or actually, no, that's just a trading post. Which if they don't defend, they're going to suffer a like retribution. Which they probably can't afford either. So what they may do is make a landing and then send 1 unit over there. Of course, that risks their own ships. Not much by anyone else. I gotta roll that thing, but that's it. Moving into another phase, let's see what happened. Spaniards finally took Tenochtitlan. Now it's very easy. Now they just have to move into 1 more Aztec area. Of course, it's going to be an exploration roll. And wipe out, there's only going to be 30 enemies there. Get their full conquistador roll in any of those areas. That's pretty potent. It should be very easy for them. And then they'll have wiped them out completely. No matter what, there's no longer 300 natives per area. There's only 30 per area. Anyway, they'll probably want to finish that off at this point, but they've got the big victory there. Now, this means Cortes becomes the viceroy here. He's not allowed to leave Azteca. And there'll presumably be a fairly heavy amount of investment in terms of the colonies being implanted there, just because you have such a bonus with him. Of course, you'll also have Cordoba here, who's going to be busily setting up colonies elsewhere. The main thing that it stops him from doing is turning Cortes around and going and taking out the Incas now. That's what you don't want to do. And historically he didn't, someone else did, so that's where we have that. Portuguese landed their troops. Now they've got to strip some off and go burn that trading post. They've effectively got Oman and Aden blocked off by their fleet sitting there. As soon as that moves, though, you might see an attempt to get those forces together for a landing in Ethiopia. The poor Turks and Poles. Well, the Turks lost their Grand Vizier. He's on the map coming again next turn. But fighting over this river line has not been pleasant, especially for the Poles going into a swamp as well. But that's bad for both sides. The river line is just bad for the attacker, and both sides are finding no traction getting across there. The Persians have decided not to continue attacking. They're going to wait until they get reinforcements next turn, and the Turks simply don't have the forces to press the war on that front. Spanish and French, while the French had to pull away from here to fight the Habsburgs, they successfully drove them off Paris, but took and not with a victory, just with a draw, but took a terrible toll in attrition on the withdrawal from Paris. So their army's in much worse shape, and this one's getting into place to lay siege to Bouyes. guess that's about it. It's a hard choice because the French, if they buy a normal major campaign, it's $20. That'll allow them to engage, say, if the Habsburgs move to Picardy, but then they can't launch another siege. That's why you want lots and lots of money, but it needs to be lots and lots. It's not the amount that a loan can cover, really. A loan could give you actually, it's a minor campaign that costs 20. A major campaign allows you to move all your pieces. So getting one additional attack costs you 80 extra bucks. That's painful. With 3 stacks, you could get 2 additional that way. Whoop, whoop. All right, onward. Round marker's still, we're still not ending the turn. All right, well, the sequence of rounds ended here. Rolled a 2. Spaniards conquered the last remaining area. They have wiped out the Aztecs. There are no longer any natives there. So now they can kind of explore and colonize with impunity. And they've really lost nothing. Get rid of this guy. All right. The Portuguese moved down here, burnt Zanzibar down. Successful exploration. And now with the turn ending, well, they still need to keep the war going to try to destroy the rest of the Aden forces. And they needed reinforcements to do this. They're in the process of building some forts. They certainly want to build the one in Zanzibar. Whether or not they're going to build, they're going to build this one. Whether or not they're going to maintain and pay for it is a good question. Because they may, oh no, they're not high enough level. I was going to say they may prefer to have a fortress there. But with just a level 1 or trading post, I don't think they can build one. So a fort is probably their best solution there. Over here, Habsburgs made another incursion. Got driven back by the French again. Poland and the Persians, neither one advanced on the Turks. The French kind of enjoy the Polish War, but they've lost a lot of victory points on it, and they don't want to keep losing them over that one location there. They're hoping maybe they'll get some sort of surrender. Turkey might well be willing to pay the Poles off with $50 to end the war and give them a boost at a level, I think they can do a level 2 peace that way, and just buy them off and get them out of it. Yeah, it costs them some victory points as well, but it's very difficult to get the Poles out of, the Poles and the Persians for that matter, are both very hard to get out of a war. And unlike the normal victory condition, peace conditions, where, say, France and Spain are in one, where Spain would love to get out of this war, but man, they don't want to pay that price. That's 2 provinces they're going to lose, they think, and some additional cash. So Spain's probably going to try to fight this out just a little bit longer, bring France down to their position. They didn't do that poorly. They managed to gain their territory. In terms of explorers, do they have anything great coming? They have Pizarro coming, which is kind of a pain. They'd like to use him to get the Incas at this point, but maybe they can still kind of do both on the cheap and not take as many losses. Because, see, the current peace condition is at -10 for them. That's 5 levels of peace. If they start next turn, I think they drop down to only a -3. The stuff currently lost this turn doesn't really count that heavily against them. So they may be able to get out of it with just giving up Naples, say. As long as the French aren't able to prosecute just as effectively next turn. If it just keeps going, it's painful for Spain because they're losing victory points to the French. The French are not that unhappy. They don't like losing the stability by maintaining the war. They don't like losing the income. But at least they're getting a pile of victory points off their successes off of Spain. They'll probably try to push the Habsburgs out of it, though. All right, well, I'll do some of the cleanup stuff and come back when everything's all set. All right, at the end of 7, French managed to get the Habsburgs out of the war and give them some additional points. Turkey couldn't get rid of either of their opponents, even though they tried to pay them off. The French actually got $50 off the Habsburgs. Spain, oh, poor Spain. They couldn't afford to surrender. But all these revolts running through their territory, pillaged territories. Now I notice I'm being sloppy. I'm not calculating the effects of the pillage and the revolts into the tax base, which of course is very helpful to Spain at this point. Just an error of omission, but it kind of fits in with I'm probably making a lot of mistakes, at least in terms of decisions that I'm making as well. Maybe not optimizing moves as well as I used to. It would explain a lot of why just about every power is kind of floundering when they're trying to do stuff. You know, the last time I remember this happening was the very first time I've played this game. You know, I got used to patterns. Maybe I had rules interpretations that helped the players a little bit more. It stands right now, they're really, really struggling. Some of it feels like bad luck, though. Some of it feels like I'm doing things the same way I used to, with the exception, of course, of forgetting a couple key points. But it really doesn't feel like it's heavily a matter of, I used to tweak the rules a little bit in this direction and they helped. If anything, I think I'm cutting about even. Anyway, Spain and France could not come to a peace. You know, France is saying, well, you know, we could come to that big peace and then I give you Roussillon back, maybe. What about that? They're just not willing to take the hit. And here's the thing. Most of the advances of this last turn are wiped out. But the problem, Spain's in the -3 spot at the end of this turn. That means if they're there next turn, bang, they're out of the war. They have to surrender if they can't get out of that space. So, of course, France isn't too far in advance of that as it stands. So, we'll see. But it's definitely a painful situation for Spain right now. And I think France isn't going to get much more than Naples out of it. But wars can be very costly. Even if you win them, France got a big winning phase this turn. Last turn, hey, they might have gotten Naples. This turn, Spain can't afford to surrender. Next turn, Spain will probably be able to surrender because France is going to not be able to gain as much, one would think. But maybe they can make some big gains here in the Netherlands, whatever. If France is able to gain heavily, Spain's in a lot of trouble because they're going to have a big chunk taken out. But if they don't, if they make a minor surrender, well, it obviously hurts Spain a lot, but look, it's hurt France too. France went from decent stability down into the crapper. They're going to be struggling for a while, recovering from this victory. And that's one factor I kind of like about the game. If you can bring yourself to making a reasonable peace early in the war, even if it gives your opponent a little more than maybe you want to, maybe you think you can drag the war out and not lose as much, still, to some extent, you may want to take that peace rather than keep fighting because war is just so painful. And poor Turkey, you know, they have no way out. They're just stuck in this grinder between these two countries and really don't have much option but to try to fight it. They can't really win it. Both countries are too powerful to force into a surrender. They offered, hey, $50, anybody help? You know, and they got die rolls that didn't work, whereas France got a die roll that really worked with the Habsburgs. Anyway, this one's going up. As you can tell, game's slowing down for me. I don't know if I'm going to make that 3-month limit. You know, when it starts to lose its excitement, and it did it right away here, it gets kind of tough. And usually, I don't know, somewhere around the 30 Years' War, I get excited about that big event coming into play. And then when that fails to really materialize into anything interesting, then it's not until, you know, the 1700 era where I start saying, oh, I'm almost done, and oh, wow, there's some big events here too. But here I'm feeling kind of a fatigue earlier than I expected. Anyway, we'll see what it comes up with. That's what happens when I play big ones.